Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and it's an honor to welcome you all to our memorial event to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Nafis Sadik, who was UNFPA's executive director from 1987 to 2000. Dr. Sadik passed away on the 14th of August, 2022. Today we are joined by esteemed guests in the room and online who have witnessed the extraordinary impact that she had for women's rights. We're very pleased that Mrs. Ambereen Dar, Dr. Nafis Sadik's daughter, is also here with us today, and we extend our sincere condolences to you and the family. We're also joined on the podium by His Excellency Munir Akram, the permanent representative of Pakistan, by Dr. Natalia Khanum, the Executive Director of UNFPA, and Her Excellency Ms. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. I'd also like to welcome those who have joined us in the room and online, including Her Excellency Heba Mustafa, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Egypt, Mr. Jens Wandel, and the Secretary General and Acting Executive Director of UNOPS, and the many colleagues who are members of our executive committee, our staff, our former staff, many icons and luminaries who knew Nafis personally. I'd particularly like to acknowledge online the presence of Dr. Thoraya Obaid, our executive director prior. I'd also like to acknowledge many of our partners who are joining us today online, partners like Alvaro from IPPF, Jill and Malika from Women Deliver, Sarah from ODI, Maria Antonietta from IPAS, Kathy and Gita from the UN Foundation, Professor Gamal from Al-Azhar University, and many, many others. We'll start today by remembering some of the moments from Dr. Sadik's life by watching a tribute video celebrating her life and her legacy. Peter?
Dr. Nafis Sadik had a bold vision for a world where every woman would have the power to decide whether, when, or how often to become pregnant. In 1994, at the International Conference on Population and Development, she set us on the path towards that world.
The program of action recognizes that healthy families are created by choice, not by chance.
She built a consensus on a plan to make sexual and reproductive health a reality for all. That plan has become the foundation of the global reproductive rights movement today. What she achieved was nothing short of revolutionary, because it transformed the lives of millions of women. It gave women real choices in life. It enabled more women to claim their rights. We've lost a pioneer, a leader, a friend, but we have not lost her inspiration. It propels us forward. We won't stop until the world Nafis Sadik envisioned becomes a reality everywhere.
Thank you. May I ask us to take a moment to pause and honor Dr. Nafis and invite everyone to join in a moment's silence together to commemorate and to find new strength together. Thank you. Let's begin. Thank you. Today we look forward to hearing some remarkable testimonies of Dr. Sadik of her inspiring personal and professional journey. And firstly, I would like to invite Dr. Natalia Kanem, Executive Director of UNFPA, to share her welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Secretary General, dear Amina Mohammed, Your Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram, Amberine, and members of the Sadik family, dear colleagues, dear friends, I bring greetings from the president of the UNFPA board, Her Excellency Ambassador Yoka Grant, who's unavoidably absent due to illness. And I'd like to thank you for your presence here today in this room and all around the world as we celebrate the life and the accomplishments of our own incomparable leader of UNFPA and of the movement to enshrine rights and choices for all, especially the reproductive health and reproductive rights of women and girls. Dr. Nafis Sadik, physician, public servant, consummate diplomat, was the second UNFPA director, executive director, having served with Mr. Rafael Salas. Her decisive actions here at the fund and on the global stage set the world on an ambitious path that has transformed the lives of millions of women and girls. As a woman of science, she employed facts and evidence to influence policy and practice and build consensus. She was a woman of many firsts, including the first woman Undersecretary General of the United Nations to serve as a chief executive of a fund and program, and always someone who valued her family, her friends, as a loving wife, a devoted mother, and a caring mentor. A courageous and brilliant strategist. She spoke out forthrightly about often unspoken issues that make a big difference in people's lived experiences: sexuality, reproductive health, gender, female genital mutilation, menstruation, violence against women. She skillfully presented solutions and brought these topics onto the agendas of international fora. She understood the nature of the challenge better than anyone, having started out her career as an obstetrician gynecologist, a defender of the poor, and looking after neglected and often uneducated women and girls in her native Pakistan. I am told that the legendary Dr. Nafis was a demanding boss, yet fair. She appreciated talent and had high expectations that UNFPA would tackle hard issues and succeed. She instilled in us at UNFPA and as a world community the understanding that population is not about numbers. It is about people, individuals who possess rights and choices. Despite fierce opposition and challenges, she never wavered. She stood her ground for what was right, and she demanded the same from everyone around her, too. How fortunate I was, as some of you, to be among those present in Cairo in 1994. Dr. Sadik's passion, her diplomatic skills, her eloquence were unrivaled. Against all odds and in the face of formidable opposition, she rallied the United Nations, governments, and civil society to forge the unprecedented ICPD program of action, which guides UNFPA's work to this day. And you should know that Dr. Nafis Sadik was a practical person, that pragmatism was the basis for successful dialogue, along with her willingness to make tough judgments and to work with others in the spirit of respectful compromise. Now, one thing she never relented on was the insistence on fair and equal and dignified treatment of women and girls. I'm very grateful that Amberine, the daughter of Dr. Nafis, is here with us to witness this occasion On behalf of the Sadik family, and personally, I've been touched by the overwhelming tributes and messages from colleagues who worked with Dr. Nafis, from partners, from member states, the younger generation who didn't know her, but she continues to inspire, and so many others. It is a testament to the tremendous depth and breadth of her vast contributions. We know that leadership requires great sacrifice, and that burden is shouldered not just by the one who leads, it is shared by those nearest and dearest. So, Amberine, we thank your late father and all your family for sharing your wonderful mother with UNFPA and indeed the world. We at UNFPA will continue to honor her memory and unparalleled legacy in the best way we know, by emulating her, as we stand for the rights, dignity, and well being of every woman, every girl, and every young person everywhere. The march continues until full rights and choices are a reality for all. Inna lillahi wa inna ilahi raji'un. May her gentle soul rest in peace. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for those wonderful words. And I'd like to call on Her Excellency Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed for her reflections. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Munir Akram, members of the Sadiq family, dear Natalia, and family of UNFPA colleagues and friends, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Today we remember and celebrate the remarkable life and contributions of an extraordinary woman, Dr. Nafis Sadik, who was a revolutionary thinker, a pioneer and a lifelong advocate for reproductive rights, gender equality, and women's leadership. She did leave a lasting mark on the UNFPA family and was a role model for women and girls and men, I might say, in her country and region, across the world, and within the United Nations. When she was appointed the Executive Director of UNFPA, as Natalia has said, the first woman to lead a UN voluntary funded program, gender parity was a distant aspiration in the world and at the United Nations. Throughout her long and distinguished career, Dr. Sadik advocated powerfully for addressing women's needs and advancing their meaningful engagement as decision makers and drivers of development policy. What's more, by showing just how effective a woman leader could be, she put more than a few cracks in that glass ceiling for the rest of us. Dr. Sadik was a fearless feminist with a bold, forward-looking vision and diplomatic skills, determination, and doggedness to make that vision a reality, a unique combination. One of Dr. Sadik's most important achievements took place at the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, 1994. As the Secretary General of the conference, Dr. Sadik was the architect of the landmark Cairo Consensus, which placed human rights at the center of population and development. An unapologetic champion of choice, she helped the world understand that when we uphold the rights and choices of individuals, both they and their societies thrive. The program of action that followed from the landmark Cairo conference recognized the right to sexual and reproductive health, the empowerment of women and gender equality as cornerstones for sustainable development and global progress and prosperity for all. Today, these interlinkages are widely recognized. Indeed, I would say that the Cairo conference helped lay the groundwork for the transformative vision of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 integrated and universal goals. But in 1994, this was groundbreaking. Dr. Sadik also served as a special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon as his special envoy on HIV/AIDS in Asia and the Pacific. The relentless efforts and commitment that she brought to each of these roles helped transform the world for millions of people who today are able to exercise their full human rights and live healthy, productive lives with dignity. On behalf of the UN, I offer our profound condolences to Dr. Sadik's family and loved ones, to the UNFPA family, the government and people of Pakistan, and all those lives that she touched. Dr. Sadik's life and legacy remain a shining inspiration to all of us in the UN as we continue to advance her dream of a more equitable, just, and inclusive world in which no one is left behind. Greetings to Thoraya, who was very much a part of the teams that did this. We are standing on Nafis' shoulders today. There are huge challenges ahead of us. Everyone in this room works 24/7 to try to ensure that girls and women have their rights, their aspirations. We reach for the sky every day. So today is a moment to reflect, to dig deep in the well of the knowledge, the compassion that Nafis had for humanity, and see if we can take a little bit more with us as we struggle to find those lost gains and to achieve the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency. Fearless feminism. May I now invite His Excellency Mr. Munir Akram, the Permanent Representative of Pakistan, to share your reflections. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Natalia Kanem, thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. It's an honor, especially to be here together with Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. I think this is an occasion to honor and remember Dr. Nafis Sadik, a pioneer for the promotion of the rights of women, reproductive rights, and gender parity. And I believe that the best tribute that can be paid to her is to witness what we have emerging at the United Nations today, a United Nations which is increasingly led by women of strength and vision, and two of them with me on this podium. I believe that that is a tribute to her. She was the first to break the barrier to the undersecretary level. It is a difficult barrier, as all of us who work at the UN know, and it is important that so many women today are in places of influence and power and policy decisions. Nafis was absolutely unstoppable. She was unstoppable, and many of you have seen her at the international level. I saw her also at the national level, and how she could persuade, and perhaps persuade may be a polite word, how she could change people's positions and policies. And I still remember 1994, the conference in Cairo. She persuaded us to change our policy. As you know, Pakistan, conservative society, but it was Nafis who persuaded the policy change that we had. And I think that it is now a universal position, reproductive rights, but it is not yet a universal achievement. And these are today also under threat from various quarters. And therefore, Nafis's message and her insistence on the right of people to have this choice of family, I think that is something that we need to rededicate and re-energize in the work of the United Nations. I won't recount all her accomplishments. You have done it much more eloquently than I could. But I would just note that this morning when I was coming to this event, I was thinking that of the disaster in Pakistan today, where 33 million families, 33 million people have been displaced by the floods. And according to our estimates, 8.5 million of them are pregnant women. And I believe, I was thinking how Nafis would have responded, what she would have recommended to our policymakers at this time to respond to the plight of these women who would be the most vulnerable and the most affected, being homeless, shelterless at this time, carrying a baby. And this is, I believe, something that we will need to respond to, and we would look to all of you at the United Nations. The Secretary General has been extremely kind in agreeing immediately to go to Pakistan as an act of solidarity. And we are depending on his solidarity, on the vision of the United Nations, the work of the United Nations to mobilize support for the people of Pakistan in this hour of need. And this is a time when we need a Nafis Sadik. And we hope that her vision will continue to guide us and guide the international community in responding to such situations as such. So, in conclusion, let me express my gratitude to all of you. Nafis was a friend, she was a teacher, not always kind teacher, but a teacher, and I miss her very much in terms of the advice and support that she provided to me in my personal life. And I'd like to express once again my condolences to her family, and I'm glad Ambreen is here. I think I would not waste words. The spirit of Nafis lives on with all of you, and I hope that spirit will continue to inspire us, and that the United Nations will become the beacon for not only human rights, but for the rights of women and for the rights of the reproductive rights for which she fought so hard. And I believe that we have the leadership today, we have the vision today, we need to achieve that vision. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency, for reminding us of that unstoppable spirit and for speaking to the realities on the ground now in your country and in elsewhere where pregnant women are often bearing the brunt of conflict, climate challenges. Many colleagues who won't be able to speak today have sent in their own reflections. We're gathering them here today in the book you see over there on my right. But we've gathered some of the things that people wanted to share. And my colleague, Alex Marshall, former speechwriter to Dr. Sadik, will be sharing some of those reflections with you all now. Thank you. Alex, over to you.
Great to see you. Well,
yeah, I'm a little nervous. I'm not used to public speaking. I'm the guy behind the words. Madam Deputy Secretary General, Madam Executive Director, Mr. Ambassador, greetings from the staff, former and present, and from the Global Nafis Sadik fan club, some of whom are online today. We're very grateful that UNFPA could make time for this opportunity to honor Dr. Sadik. Quite literally, we wouldn't be here if she hadn't been there. Between 1970 and 2000, she built, managed, and handed on UNFPA as a strong presence in the UN system, more than any other individual, even her predecessor, Rafael Salas, who was a remarkable man in his own right. She made the path we walk today. Within the UN system, she made the path more equitable, especially as regards women. But she didn't just change the system. With a little help from her friends, she changed the world that women live in. And I know there are many of you out there who have things you'd like to say if we had more time. There are many more who can no longer speak for themselves, but whose lives she changed. People whom she led and supported and inspired and pushed and prodded and put right. I can still hear her voice, just like everybody else in her vicinity. Let me begin by reading a message from Tarai Obeid, who succeeded her as executive director and is a courageous leader, an inspiration in her own right. Tarai says, sorry.
It's fine. Sorry.
Tarai says, Nafis was a bright light in my life and the lives of many who came into contact with her. She believed in me from far away when I was a junior staff member, and she mentored me when I became a senior official following her leadership at UNFPA. She gave me space to grow and lead as executive director, but she also held my hand when I needed her wisdom. She had a dream for all women to be free of fear in a society in which men and women lived their lives in equality and justice. Dr. Sadik joined UNFPA in 1970. We were pretty small potatoes back then. When I showed up in January 1973, we had global staff meetings around the table in the conference room. We had maybe $5 million to play with in 1973. When Nafis retired in 2000, our budget was approaching 350 million. But you can't measure Nafis's contribution in dollars and cents, as everybody has said. She started, let me illustrate this. She started her professional life as an obgyn in an army post, somewhere up country in Pakistan. She was appalled to see how the soldiers' wives lived. They were thin, they were anemic, they were worn out already, even though they were young by constant childbirth. And they couldn't do anything about it. They had no idea they could choose another way to live, let alone, right, they had no idea. The pill wasn't around. They couldn't do anything themselves. So this is what Nafis did. I only have a word for this, but you can see it happening. She was in her 20s, not long out of medical school, went to the commanding officer, not her immediate superior, but the big boss, the colonel, the man in command of the whole cantonment, God, you know. She told him about the women she served. She told him how they lived. And she told him that he needed to see to it that his men used condoms. Exactly. Yeah, and that sums up the way she was all her life. She would go to the top, the very top, and speak up for women, ordinary, poor, dispossessed women. She would say the unsayable, speak the truth out loud, and bring the invisible into the light. In effect, this is what the 1994 consensus does. Recall that the 1974 World Population Plan of Action mentions women maybe a dozen times. I know that because I looked. 10 years on, our issues had their own section in the 1984 Mexico City Declaration. I believe because the 3-4 paragraphs in there were smuggled into the document by a sort of guerrilla group of women, including you know who. But only 10 years after that, the ICPD Program of Action put women, reproductive rights and health, and gender equality front and center. It was the first conference which was not specifically about women to do that. And let's remember, consensus at ICPD was by no means a foregone conclusion. The proposed program of action broke ground in so many different ways, and for every initiative, in whatever area, there was pushback. The years of preparation were tense for all of us, and outcomes were still uncertain, even on the very eve of the conference. Gamal Sirur of Al-Azhar notes that a few weeks before ICPD, Dr. Sadik contacted me to express her great concern and apprehension at the growing storm against the draft program of action. And then he says, during the conference, I witnessed with great admiration her leadership, diplomacy, and enthusiasm, which turned the conference into an unprecedented success. ICPD was also the first major conference to incorporate NGOs, civil society, as members of official delegations. There were several encounters at UNFPA in the run-up, crowded rooms featuring civil society leaders of the caliber of Bella Abzug, if you remember her,
Yes.
a mighty woman. She made their demands pretty clear, but they were pushing at an open door. And when Nafis went to address the NGO side of the conference, the roof nearly came off the hall. Fact is, she loved those women, and they loved her. Jürgen Sakowski says, Nafis was the brains and soul of UNFPA. Sahir Sadi simply says, she was my hero. Many of you mentioned how smart Nafis was and how quickly her mind moved. Yeah, this was a great asset, of course, but it has its downside. Nafis tended to work on the assumption that everybody should know what she knew and understand it in the same way. This was sometimes a challenge because she was always coming up with new concepts and ways of looking at issues, and we're not telepathic. I mean, try it. Never mind. I could tell you stories. I won't. O.J. Sykes points out that the big issue when Nafis joined the UNFPA was rapid population growth. There were books about the population bomb and population control and all this. And so basically it was about women in developing countries having too many children and kindly stop. But nobody had any idea how to do this. There were sectors, but nobody was putting the blind men trying to describe an elephant is the way that O.J. puts it. She saw how the pieces fitted together. For example, the importance of girls' education to empower decision-making, freedom to make decisions, reproductive health, and other services to give them effect, and the importance of data collection to measure progress. Recent declines in population growth, and I'm sure you've been reading about that, are in part the result of this understanding. Women have choices today they never had before. Nafis's command of the issues, a power of recall, and her head for detail were legendary. Peter Hood says he was hoping for big things back when. He was posted to Somalia, but he was brought back to New York early. He said he had no idea that Dr. Sadik even knew who he was. But when they found themselves in the same elevator, she said, "What? Back already?" Margaret O'Callaghan, who was then new to the office in Papua New Guinea, recalls a conversation with Nafis in the middle of the fairly wild celebration after the POA was adopted in 1994. I mean, we were high. What did Nafis want to talk about? Of all things, a recent audit, which had given the PNG office an unsatisfactory rating. Give me a break, Mary Simonon says visitors to UNFPA and leaders on her trips were fascinated, first by the beautiful saris and jewels, of course, but then by her immense knowledge, endless first-hand experiences of examples of countries' experiences. And that won them over. I mean, just knowing exactly what's going on and being able to put your finger on it, that's what convinces people. Stories, there's all this, never mind. I always champion stories against data. People understand data, but they're moved by stories. She was the brains of the outfit for sure, but she was also its heart. Delia Barcelona says her mother passed away in December 1998 in the midst of preparations for ICPD +5, and Delia was at the heart of it. When I told Dr. Sadik, Dr. Sadik said, "I'm sorry to hear that. Go, you only lose a mother once." And when I got to my hometown, 3 hours outside Manila, there was a warm letter and a huge bouquet of flowers from her. Nafis's son Omar says it's best. She transcended age and time and was as equally beloved by people much older than her as she was by tiny little children, because they recognized her heart. Omar added, "She fit more into one day than most of us do, probably in 1 year. She was incomparable and she was unmatched, and she never stopped." The morning after ICB closed, after that one party, I remember a boat in the middle of the Nile, never mind. Most of us were just exhausted. I mean, we'd been working flat out for not months, but years. And where was Nafis? She was on a plane, bound for Kazakhstan, I think. And she took nothing for granted. She knew that ICPD wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And she just kept going. Pandelaji points out that she recognized the needs of women in refugee situations, women displaced by the terrible disasters like as Mr. Ambassador was talking about. And the fact that we can help there was because Nafis took the initiative to say women in refugee situations, women displaced by disasters have exactly the same needs as women in any other situation, and kindly recognize it. People didn't want to talk about it, you know? Nafis made them talk about it. Similarly, with the MDGs, there was no guarantee that the Millennium Development Goals were going to include our issues, but Nafis made it happen with a gang of people, including Stan Bernstein, who worked tirelessly for that. And similarly with the SDGs, the reason we have it, it's what is it, number 7, number 8 in the SDGs, is because Nafis was there doing it before it happened. So she was just hugely influential. Setu Rao says at meetings of heads of agencies, others would wait till she'd spoken and then just say, I agree with Dr. Sadik. She spoke up for UN reform, for example. I mean, it wasn't a nice, it was difficult to talk about that. UN reform, of course, the UN is perfect. We all know that. She made it, made it an issue. But, she got there the hard way. Some of the women in this room can attest in their own experience. In the early days, she'd be the only woman at the table. She would make a suggestion and the discussion would go on. And then the man would make the same suggestion and everybody would applaud. She had a kind of aura. A comment on the Padlet said, when she entered a room, you could feel her presence. Her eyes showed determination and her voice showed that a fierce defender of women and girls was present. Kathy Calvin from the UN Foundation says, Nafis, never let us forget that progress starts with the rights of girls and women. We won't forget, Nafis, she says, and we will keep working. Nafis kept working. She didn't, I don't think she recognized the concept of retirement. Not for me either, I have to say. I tried to reach her longtime amanuensis, Sheila Murdoch, but I couldn't. And I wanted just to get some idea of Nafis's post-retirement agenda. I had some idea, but I did the odd bit and piece for her. But she was just on the road the whole time. She was on boards. She was at universities. She was speaking at meetings. She was invited here, and so on. She just kept going. Siri Tellier has a lovely story. She said, in 1977, this was when Siri was a young staff member. She wasn't married. She was a Western woman, obviously. Everybody, says Siri, including the UNDP rep in Afghanistan, said it was a bad idea to send a young unmarried Western woman to head the office. Now, if he said, why not? To convince everyone, she sent me on a short-term mission. Once they see her, she says they'll be okay, and they were. The problem was the male Westerners who were unable to change their own culture. Sheila McRae mentioned another occasion where people were asking her, but wouldn't that be against their culture? And Nafis's answer was, then change the culture. Nizamuddin reminded me what she said on the matter of at the World Conference on Women in 1995. No value worth the name supports the oppression and enslavement of women. But the role of culture and tradition is to provide a framework for human well-being. If they are used against us, we will reject them and move on. Yeah. I've seen that on posters. It's great. This speechwriter, Nafis had already written the speech. She only needed somebody to put it down. And that was sometimes a challenge. Anyway, let me just say one more thing. When she traveled usually in shalwar kameez, but when she arrived out came the saris. Elena Carlos said she was a sight to behold in her silk sari. She wore with great flair and impeccable taste. Dr. Leila Myra of WHO simply calls her the best dressed UN official. And where did she get this? She went shopping. I've heard stories about her shopping trips. But Dr. Merritt also points out that Nafis loved to relax in the family. And one of the things in Omar's tender note is his emphasis on how good a mother and grandmother, great grandmother she was. You know, she always made time for the family. Let me end as we began with the words of Taraya. May she rest in eternal peace as she devoted her life to realize a world of peace. We miss her, and we will always miss her. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that wonderful story, for all the reflections from many colleagues who shared them with you and who you so beautifully captured, weaving together the reflections of those who worked with her, who were inspired by her, and for all of us who will take her work further forward. I realise I think the Deputy Secretary General has to leave for another meeting now. So may I thank you for being... No, I'm sorry, I'm not. I've been getting instructions, but thank you so much. And our final few words from Jens, please.
Natalia, Ambassador, representatives of the Sadik family. I just wanted to share a moment where I realized I became part of the Nafis Sadik fan club. I was a young UN employee in Asia, and Nafis came in a conference, and we were sitting with some of the staff, and then I was invited in, and we could sit and talk. And it was the first time I ever met a head of agency. For me, that was a big thing. And I could see the strengths that one person can deliver when you base it on human values, on UN values. And that was also a first for me. And then when you sat with her and she talked about her work, her ideas, she listened to, what I had to say. And then it was probably also the first time I realized that iron will, iron commitment to change the world for the better can come with kindness, and it can come with inclusion. And that I had never seen before. So that was the moment I want to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jens, Under Secretary General and Acting Executive Director of UNOPS. Thank you for that brief but very poignant reflection. And I think we've heard so many poignant moments and reflections from many colleagues, and there are more I know who would like to speak. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have the condolences book and we do have a Padlet, so we'll be able to capture those and share those, of course, with the family. I'd like to thank everybody who attended, everybody who was with us in that unstoppable spirit, and including those who helped prepare for the event. Many staff have been involved behind the scenes to make this such a meaningful moment to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Nafis Sadik. Thank you all very much.